Today's daf is daf Kuf Zayin, and we'll begin 5 lines down from the top. Amemar Pasach Lo Lahashmaita de Rava Bahai Lishna. This is another presentation of Rava's statement that if a person tasted, he ate something before Kiddush, then he's allowed to make Kiddush. If he tasted, he ate something before Havdalah, he's allowed to recite Havdalah. And Amemar has it in this Lishna. Amar Rava, Hilchasa, Ta'am Mekadesh, Ta'am Mavdil. If he ate before Kiddush, he's allowed to make Kiddush. If he ate before Havdalah, he's allowed to recite Havdalah. Mishalo Kiddush be Erev Shabbos, Mekadesh Vaholich Kol Yom Kulo. And it means that he can recite Kiddush anytime during the day until after Shabbos ends. Umishalo Hivdil b'Motzai Shabbos, Mavdil Vaholich Kol Hayom Kulo. If he did not recite Havdalah on Motzi Shabbos, then he has one day, meaning all of Yom Rishon, to make up the Havdalah of Motzi Shabbos. Not like the first Lishna that we had yesterday at the top of the Yomud, where we gave him the entire week, which means up until Yom Revi'i, until Wednesday. But here in the second Lishna, Meimar's transmission of Rava, we only give him one day, just the first day, and that's it, only on Sunday. La'alacha, we paskin like the Lishna Kama, and he could be mashlim even on Monday, even on Tuesday, and that's what we saw earlier in the Bnei Rabbi Chia, and also we can prove it from the fact that we recite Havdalah al Kos Motzai Tisha B'Av. Now, if Tisha B'Av is Chal on a Sunday, and we're going to make Havdalah Motzei Tisha B'Av, which is technically according to Halacha Monday, you see that you can go beyond Sunday. So that's how we paskin like the first Lishna, that someone who didn't recite Havdalah can recite Havdalah up until Tuesday, but not Wednesday. Amalei Mar Yenuka Umar Kshisha B'rei Rav Chizil Rav Ashi. There were two Amoraim who spoke to Rav Ashi, and they told him that Zimnin Chada Ikla Amemar Li Asrin, that on quite a few occasions Amemar came to our shtetl, our shtot, v'lo havelon chamra, and we didn't have wine for Havdalah. There was no wine available in our location. Aisina Lake Shikra, we brought out beer, and we'll soon see the different types of beer made in different ways. Below Avdil, he balked, he refused to make Havdalah on beer. Ubas Tavas, and he went to sleep in a state of inui, meaning affliction, without eating, because you're not allowed to eat before Havdalah, and he refused to recite Havdalah over beer. Lemachar, and now the Amoraim tell Rav Ashi the following story, that on Sunday, Trachna, we put in extra effort, the Aisina Le Chamra, we finally found wine that he could make Havdalah, and Vial Tibul Talmidi, he recited Havdalah. Now Meimer was very happy that he could eat a meal. And Lashana, a year later, or a different year, Su Iklo Liasrin, again he came back to visit us. So Meimer is back here in our location. And again, the same thing occurred. Lo Havilon Chamra, we didn't have any wine to drink. Aisina Shikra, and we brought out beer. But this time, Omar, Meimer declared, Ihachi, if I see that on a regular basis you don't have wine, in other words, in this city, This shtat doesn't have wine; it only has shechar. Therefore, chamar medinu avdil v'tamidi. I see that the status of shechar is chamar medina. It's considered like the mainstay liquid or beverage in this city because you cannot get access to wine. And this, my friends, is the source for the famous halacha of Chamra de Medina. Now, the words Chamra de Medina mean Yayin Sheshosim B'nei HaMedina Kula. It's an accepted, popular drink, and the entire city drinks it, and it becomes like Yayin. It becomes like a mainstay beverage. And La halacha, if there's no wine in the city, then we paskin that you're allowed to be mavdil on sheikhar. Now, we'll have to see if this same halacha applies to Kiddush, whether or not you could be mavdil on sheikhar and chamar medina, or you could be makadish, I should say, on chamar medina. But yet, the poskim say that even in a case of chamar medina, it might be preferable to recite Havdalah on Yayin. If Yayin is scarce, then go with the Charmadina. But L'chatchila could be that we would rather prefer, if all things are ideal, to recite Havdalah over Yayin. L'halacha, if there's no Yayin in the city and they have Sheikhar, we're going to recite Havdalah on Sheikhar. However, Mayim, water, says the Rashbam, is not considered Chamar Medina, even though everyone drinks water, but that's not a beverage. So that therefore you're not going to make Havdalah on water, even in a place where there's no Yayin and there's no Sheikh. Shamat Mina Tlas. The Gemara says we can derive from this story of Hamemar 3 halachic conclusions. Number one, Shema Mina Mavdil B'Tfila Tzarech She'Yavdil HaKos. We have every reason to assume that Hamemar had already recited Havdalah Atachon Antanu in Chonen Adas in Tfilas Arvis, and then he came and he wanted to recite Havdalah HaKos. And it wasn't sufficient that he was Yotze, the mitzvah. No, he wasn't Yotze. Even though he recited Havdalah in Tfilah, that's not enough. There's a separate, independent chiyuv to be Mavdil HaKos. And the Gemara Masechet Brachas on Daf Lamed Gimel brings an opinion of some Amoraim that Hamavdil b'Tfilah tzarich she'yavdil HaKos. However, there seems to be one opinion that ain't tzarich lahavdil b'shneim. He doesn't need a double havdalah, and one havdalah is sufficient. But our sugya reflects the majority opinion that you need, in addition to havdalah and tefillah, atachon and tanu. In my review, you also have to have another havdalah ala kos. Next, Ushmamina, the second conclusion we can derive from the story of Hamemar is Asalo Yom Sheyochal Kodem She'avdil. There's a strict prohibition against eating before Havdalah, and therefore Hamemar went to sleep in a state of affliction without eating. He was hungry. And thirdly, Shmamina Michelo Hivdu Motai Shabbos Mavdil Holich Kol Shabbos Kulo. Now, this phrase in the Gemara Kol Shabbos Kulo has to be reinterpreted because we can't prove anything from a Meimar other than the fact that on Sunday he recited Havdalah. But the Gemara takes the sort of literary license to say Kol Shabbos Kulo, meaning the first 3 days of the week, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, even though that you can't prove from the story of Hamemar. But the Gemara says that we've accepted that Lishna in Rava, that Havdalah can be recited up to, but not including Wednesday, and it's not limited to Sunday. Rav Huna asked the following question to Rav Chizda with regard to Kiddush and Havdalah and Sheikhar. We said before that it's permissible if the Sheikhar in that particular location is called Chamar Medina to recite Havdalah over a cup of beer. What about Kiddush? Can you recite Kiddush on beer? Now, we're talking about a situation in which, as the Rashbam explains it, there was a dearth of yayin. There was no yayin that was to be found. Can we recite Kiddush on Sheikhar? The Rashbam further adds that the word Sheikhar here in this context is beer that's made from dates. They used to crush the dates and make beer out of them. That's called shechar ha'osui mitmar. Amalor, Rav Chisda responded, Hashta, I have the following question to ask you. Umay pirzuma, ute'ene, vi'asne, tiboy mine rav, mirav, v'rav mirebi chiv, rav chiv mirebi, v'lo poshet le, is shikra mi boy. There was a tradition that even a higher quality beer, for example, pirzuma, which is made from barley, not from dates, but barley, that's already high quality beer, or te'eni, or they made beer out of figs, which is again a higher quality than dates. The asne, and they used certain kinds of berries that grew wild, and they were able to make beer from. Now, these three categories or qualities of beer are on a higher level than regular beer, which is made from dates, as we say. And yet, despite that, we have a whole tradition in which this question as to whether or not we can use these very high quality beers for the sake of Kiddush if we don't have wine. And this question came all the way up to Rebbe. It was Rav who asked his uncle Reb Chia. Reb Chia asked his Rebbe Yehuda Nasi, and Rebbe Yehuda Nasi did not allow reciting Kiddush over beer, even these high quality beers. Is therefore stam sheicha, which is made from dates, which is a lower quality miboy, you have a suffix about it, for sure we should not be reciting Kiddush on beer. Now here, the rational mind begs to understand why is it that there's a fundamental distinction between Kiddush and Havdalah. Throughout the last few blot, we've seen over and over again an equation, an analogy between Kiddush and Havdalah. The same dinim apply to both. We even mentioned now, today, on Daf Kuv Zayin, that you don't eat before Kiddush, you don't eat before Havdalah. But there is one fundamental difference, and the nafkamina is going to be Chamra de Medina Sheikha. And that is that in the case of Kiddush, we're not just reciting a bracha ala kos and setting up a kosher bracha. For that, maybe Chamra Medina would be sufficient. But in the case of Kiddush, we're being kovea seuda. And Yayin has a specific status as far as being kovea seuda. Yayin is kovea bracha liatzma. It has its own bracha. Yayin is a chirela yayin. Yayin was used for nesachim. There are many, many features that make yayin unique, and you can set up a suda. The kickoff of the suda is yayin, but when you drink beer, that's not a suda, and it cannot be kovea suda. It could function as a kosher bracha for cedar bracha alakos. In the case of Havdalah, all we need is cedar bracha alakos, and therefore Sheikha is Chamra de Medina is sufficient. Over Mine, the Talmidim thought when they heard this that Kaduche hu delov makdishin anyway, avol avdulim avdilim. That from the fact that this discussion went on between Rav Chisda and Rav Huna about Kiddush on Sheikhar, in which Rav Chisda, seemed to assume that we don't want to make Kiddush on Sheikhar, the Talmidim thought, maybe, you know what, we should make an equation, and if Sheikhar and Chamar Medina are excluded for Kiddush, likewise, they should be excluded for Havdalah. Amalahu Rav Chisda set the record straight. Amar Rav, this is what I heard, Hachi Amar Rav, Kishem Shem Makadshim Olav, Kach Ein Mavdilin Olav Marnami, Amar Rav Tachlifa Bar Avimi, Amar Shmuk Shem Shem Makadshim Olav, Kach Ein Mavdilin Olav. Now, at this point, the Gemara comes to the conclusion that we're going to exclude Chamar Medina, not just for Kiddush, but also for Havdalah. And that would seem to be codified both by Rav and by Rav Tachlifa Bar Avimi in the name of Shmuel, and Ein Mavdilin O. Now, here we have to mention that there's Machlokas Rishonim how to understand this or not. According to one opinion, the Gemara is vacillating about Chamar Medina. And Rav is now equating Kiddush and Avdullah with regard to Sheikhar, even though it's Chamar Medina, and rejecting a Meimar who said that you could be Mavdil on Chamar Medina. So this whole Gemara that we're learning now, attributing to Rav this Chumrah that you cannot use Chamar Medina even for Avdullah, contradicts a Meimar who, once he was convinced that Sheikhar in that particular place was Chamar Medina, recited Avdullah on Sheikhar. So that school of thought in the Rishonim has a debate here between a Meimar in the earliest sugya here and Rav here in the latest sugya. However, there are those Rishonim who say that the question is, in this whole suffix in the Gemara, in a situation where Sheikhar is not Chamar Medina. I mean, you may have people who drink beer, but it's not the accepted standard national beverage. And therefore, it's possible that Rav would agree that if it were Chamar Medina, then you could be Mavdil and maybe even be Mekadesh on it. We don't know. However, according to this school of Rishonim, it's very possible that because Sheikhar was not Chamar Medina in this particular location, that's why Rav balked and refused to allow Kiddush and Avdullah on Sheikhar. But had it been Chamar Medina, then Rav might have accepted Havdalah and possibly even Kiddush on beer. Levi Shadar le Rabbi Shichra bar Tleisar Megani. It was a very, very special, high quality beer. I mean, we spoke about different qualities of beer, but this is like the top of the line. What was so special about this beer? They used to pile up 13 piles, that's called tleisar, of dates and megane, and they would crush 13 piles of dates, and they made sheikhar tmorim out of it. In other words, they would soak the dates after the katisha of such a large volume of dates in water. The water now absorbed the time of the dates, of the tmorim. And Levi took this water after the shriya, after the soaking of the tmorim, and he added other tmorim. And he did this over and over and over again 13 times until the sheikhar was the most mishubach that you could imagine. And Tame, they gave it to they gave it to Rebbe to taste this high quality Levi's beer. Havi bosim tuva. It was very tasty to him. He really enjoyed it. Omar, and he declared, Rebbe, this is such a high quality, unique kind of a beverage, of a beer, that it's fit to make Kiddush on. Right, we say in Shir el B'yayin, but now we're saying that there's something equal to Yayin because it's so exceptional. However, the story gets a little sour, so to speak, because Belele Tsari, apparently this very sophisticated date beer with dates after dates after dates soaked in water is a laxative. And so Rebbe that evening had a rough time. Omar, and he declared, Miyasran umefayes. Now these two words, Miyasran umefayes, lend themselves to a major machlokas, how to interpret them. According to all the Rishonim, the Rashbam, Rabbeinu Chananel, not Rashi though, what Rebbe was saying was that this mashke, this particular superior beverage that Levi prepared with such love, is miyasron. Miyasron means yisurin. It causes pain to the guf, to the body. And Umefayes. Now you read it with a question mark according to Rashbam. Mefayes means, are these words of pius, of ratzon, of ritzu in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu worthy of this kind of a wine that causes so much discomfiture? And therefore, the maskana of the Gemara, according to Rashbam, is that Rebbe's final comment was, this is not good for Kiddush because it hurts the body. Rashi, on the other hand, says that Rebbe's intention was that even though the beer is mitzayir sa'adam, after drinking it, he causes stomach problems, but nevertheless, b'shas hashtiya hu mefaiso. While he's drinking it, it's tov, it's roy, it's tasty, and that's enough to justify Kiddush and Avdol. Amar Rav Yosef, Adar berabim. Now the Gemara goes on into a little bit of a kind of semi-agadita, different statements of the Amoraim that we should stay away from beer. Don't drink too much beer. Rav Yosef, Edar berabim, says, I'm willing to take what's called a neder al das rabim. A neder al das rabim, when you take a public vow or a pledge, doesn't lend itself to hafara, to hataras nedarim. And he's willing to take a neder without hafara, delo eshte shikra, I'll never drink beer. Intolerable. Amar Rava, eshte mei zorion velo eshte shikra. I'd rather drink water that has waste products in it. What they used to do is they used to take flax, natural flax, and they used to soak it in water. He says, give me that water to drink, even though they're sruchim, they're smelly, they have an awful smell. I'd rather drink that than beer. Furthermore, the Amar Rava tehevi shakyutse shikra, the drinking of beer, man de mekadesh ashikra. In other words, if somebody would recite Kiddush on beer, then, again, we're assuming he has the access to wine, then he should be punished from the heavens. Measure against measure, and he won't have the funds to buy wine. He'll always have to drink beer. So Rava is excluding beer for Kiddush. We don't know what Rava would say in this context about Havdol. Rav Ashkechei Rav Huna de Kodesh at Shikra. On one occasion, Rav caught his Talmud Rav Huna, who was reciting Kiddush on Shechar, and apparently there was access to wine. So Rav Huna turns to Rav and he says, Shari Abba lemikne istere mishikra. Now, the word Abba here, because he says Shari Abba, is a reference to Rav himself. And the greats are called Abba, like the father of the generation. So he refers to Rav as Abba. And he says, okay, so I'm sorry, I made a mistake here. I said that Rav found Rav Huna drinking wine. I'm sorry. I didn't put the comma in the right place. Rav, Ashkeche Rav Huna, the Kodesh HaShikra. In other words, Rav Huna found Rav drinking beer for Kiddush, making Kiddush on beer. So Rav Huna says to Rav that you, meaning Abba, have begun to sell beer. He began, apparently Rav at some point, in order to make a parnasa, became a beer seller. And therefore, once you started dealing with beer and you made a profit off of beer, it became chaviv beinecha. Beer became the most important thing. It had a label on it. It didn't say Heineken on it. It said Rav's beer. So Rav was marketing beer, and that gave it a certain chashivas, and Rav was very proud of the beer that he was marketing, and therefore he recited Kiddush over beer. And even though Rav Chizda quoted Rav earlier that we don't make Kiddush or Avdollah on beer, that was only in a case where it's not Chaviv Olav. But here, it's Chaviv Olav. Torah Rabbanan, ein mekatchen ela al hayayin, v'ein mevarchim ela al hayayin. This brisa maintains the position that we recite Kiddush on Yayin and not Shechar. Please, let's not make a mistake. He's not excluding Pas. You could make Kiddush on Pas, but he's talking about comparing beverages, and only Yayin is accepted for Kiddush. So the Gemara understood that when it says Ein Mevarchim El Al Yayin, it meant to say that the only time you recite a bracha lefanei, a bracha richona, is only if you drink wine. No other beverages deserve a bracha richona. So the Gemara immediately asks, "Atu ashikra amaya bilo b'varchin alai shekol niyeh." You have to admit that at least shahakol, you require a bracha rishona on water, on beer, on any other beverage. Here's what the Bryce has in mind. Ein omrim havei kos shel bracha levarech, and now we're talking about birkas hamazon, and not the bracha rishona, but the bracha achrona. We have a kos of birkas hamazon el alayayin. We will not accept shechar or mayim for a kos shel birkas hamazon. Rabbanan mekadshim ala shechar mishum Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Shimon Amru mekadshim. So here we have an explicit machlokus recorded in the Bryce as to whether or not we can recite Kiddush on Sheikhar. According to Tanakama, yes. And according to Tanakama, no. And according to Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Shimon, yes. Here's another thing. Miteimas yayin kolshu. In other words, after you recite Kiddush on a kol shel yayin, all you have to do is have a te'ima kolshu. Just drink a little bit. And Rabbi Yehuda Omer, he disagrees. He says below lugma, you have to have a full cheek of yain, which is called rov revius. Rav Huna Marav Chaim Tani Rav Gidol Dimin Narash, from a place called Narash. Hamakadesh v'toam alone lugma of yatzav in lav lo yatzav. And this Rav Huna says in the name of Rav that we accept the shita of Rav Yosef, Rav Yehuda, Lechumra, and we require drinking a minimum of mole lugmav for Kiddush. And without mole lugmav, you're not yotze the mitzvah of Kiddush. And this is how we pass in la halacha, that if lo tam mole lugmav lo yotze, but he doesn't have to be toem the makadesh. It's enough that somebody at the table who heard his Kiddush and was yotze in his chiyuv by hearing his Kiddush, that he would drink a mole lugmav. That's the Rashbam Shita. Ramchalava says in the name of the Gaonim that with regard to a kol shel Kiddush, the Makadesh himself has to drink mole lugmav. Rav Nachbar Yitzchak, Anot Ninole, I learned to the Brisa in the name of Rav Gidol. Lo Gidol Bar Menashe, v'lo Gidol Bar Menasyomi, ela Gidol Stama. In other words, if you're talking about which Gidol is, I don't have it the way you have it in the tradition, that it was Rav Gidol Demin Narash. I have it was Rav Gidol, so I'm not sure which Rav Gidol is it. Is it the Rav Gidol Bar Menashe, or is Rav Gidol Bar Menasyomi, or is it Rav Gidol Minar Narash? Narash. So the Gemara is Ma'inaf Gemina. Why are you making such a big deal in order to identify which Rav Gidol was whose opinion was recorded in the Brisa, which Rav Gidol is? The Mirma Didei. Mirma is the verb of Rami, of a stira, that if we have another statement from the same person, then we'll have to raise a contradiction. So it's very important to know who exactly was the one who made this statement.